in these reverses by one faithful creature who had been, in old times, a poor kitchen wench in the family, who was then their solitary servant, but who might have been, for the truth and fidelity of her heart, who might have been, the wife of Tim Linkinwater himself, sir. Pursuing this encomium upon the poor follower with such energy and relish as no words can describe, brother Charles leant back in his chair and delivered the remainder of his relation with greater composure. It was in substance this, that, proudly resisting all offers of permanent aid and support from her late mother's friends, because they were made conditional upon her quitting the wretched man, her father, who had no friends left, and shrinking with instinctive delicacy from appealing in their behalf to that true and noble heart which he hated, and had, through its greatest and purest goodness, deeply wronged by misconstruction and ill report, this young girl had struggled alone and unassisted to maintain him by the labour of her hands. That through the utmost depths of poverty and affliction she had toiled, never turning aside for an instant from her task, never wearied by the petulant gloom of a sick man, sustained by no consoling recollections of the past or hopes of the future, never repining for the comforts she had rejected, or bewailing the hard lot she had voluntarily incurred. That every little accomplishment she had acquired in happier days had been put into requisition for this purpose, and directed to this one end. That for 2 long years, toiling by day and often too by night, working at the needle, the pencil, and the pen, and submitting, as a daily governess, to such caprices and indignities as women, with daughters, too often love to inflict upon their own sex when they serve in such capacities, as though in jealousy of the superior intelligence which they are necessitated to employ. Indignities, in 99 cases out of every 100, heaped upon persons immeasurably and incalculably their betters, but outweighing in comparison any that the most heartless blackleg would put upon his groom. That for 2 long years, by dint of labouring in all these capacities and wearying in none, she had not succeeded in the sole aim and object of her life, but that, overwhelmed by accumulated difficulties and disappointments, she had been compelled to seek out her mother's old friend, and with a bursting heart to confide in him at last. If I had been poor, said brother Charles, with sparkling eyes, if I had been poor, Mr. Nickleby, my dear sir, which thank God I am not, I would have denied myself, of course anybody would under such circumstances, the commonest necessaries of life to help her. As it is, the task is a difficult one. If her father were dead, nothing could be easier, for then she should share and cheer the happiest home that brother Ned and I could have, as if she were our child or sister. But he is still alive. Nobody can help him. That has been tried 1,000 times. He was not abandoned by all without good cause, I know. Cannot she be persuaded to... Nicholas hesitated when he had got thus far. To leave him, said brother Charles. Who could entreat a child to desert her parent? Such entreaties, limited to her seeing him occasionally, have been urged upon her, not by me, but always with the same result. Is he kind to her? Said Nicholas. Does he requite her affection? True kindness, considerate, self-denying kindness, is not in his nature, returned Mr. Cheeryble. Such kindness as he knows he regards her with, I believe. The mother was a gentle, loving, confiding creature, and although he wounded her from their marriage till her death as cruelly and wantonly as ever did man, she never ceased to love him. She commended him on her deathbed to her child's care. Her child has never forgotten it, and never will. Have you no influence over him? Asked Nicholas. I, my dear sir, the last man in the world. Such are his jealousy and hatred of me, that if he knew his daughter had opened her heart to me, he would render her life miserable with his reproaches, although this is the inconsistency and selfishness of his character. Although if he knew that every penny she had came from me, he would not relinquish one personal desire that the most reckless expenditure of her scanty stock could gratify. An unnatural scoundrel, said Nicholas indignantly. We will use no harsh terms, said brother Charles in a gentle voice, but accommodate ourselves to the circumstances in which this young lady is placed. Such assistance as I have prevailed upon her to accept, I have been obliged, at her own earnest request, to dole out in the smallest portions, lest he, finding how easily money was procured, should squander it even more lightly than he is accustomed to. She has come to and fro, secretly and by night, to take even this, and I cannot bear that things should go on this way, Mr. Nickleby. I really cannot bear it." Then it came out by little and little how that the twins had been revolving in their good old heads manifold plans and schemes for helping this young lady in the most delicate and considerate way, and so that her father should not suspect the source whence the aid was derived, and how they had at last come to the conclusion that the best course would be to make a feint of purchasing her little drawings and ornamental work at a high price, and keeping up a constant demand for the same, for the furtherance of which end and object it was necessary that somebody should represent the dealer in such commodities, and after great deliberation they had pitched upon Nicholas to support this character. "He knows me," said brother Charles, "and he knows my brother Ned. Neither of us would do. Frank is a very good fellow, a very fine fellow, but we are afraid that he might be a little flighty and thoughtless in such a delicate matter, and that he might, in short, be too susceptible, for she is a beautiful creature, sir, just what her poor mother was, and falling in love with her before he knew well his own mind, carry pain and sorrow into that innocent breast, which we would be the humble instruments of gradually making happy. He took an extraordinary interest in her fortunes when he first happened to encounter her, and we gather from the inquiries we have made of him that it was she in whose behalf he made the turmoil which led to your first acquaintance." Nicholas stammered out that he had before suspected the possibility of such a thing, and in explanation of its having occurred to him, described when and where he had seen the young lady himself. "Well, then you see," continued brother Charles, "that he wouldn't do. Tim Linkinwater is out of the question, for Tim, sir, is such a tremendous fellow that he could never contain himself, but would go to loggerheads with the father before he had been in the place 5 minutes. You don't know what Tim is, sir, when he is aroused by anything that appeals to his feelings very strongly. Then he is terrific, sir, is Tim Linkinwater, absolutely terrific. Now in you we can repose the strictest confidence. In you we have seen, or at least I have seen, and that's the same thing, for there's no difference between me and my brother Ned, except that he is the finest creature that ever lived, and that there is not, and never will be, anybody like him in all the world. In you we have seen domestic virtues and affections, and delicacy of feeling, which exactly qualify you for such an office. And you are the man, sir." "The young lady, sir," said Nicholas, who felt so embarrassed that he had no small difficulty in saying anything at all. Is she a party to this innocent deceit?" "Yes, yes," returned Mr. Cheeryble, "at least she knows you come from us. She does not know, however, but that we shall dispose of these little productions that you'll purchase from time to time, and perhaps if you did it very well, that is, very well indeed, perhaps she might be brought to believe that we made a profit of them. Eh? In this guileless and most kind simplicity, brother Charles was so happy, and in this possibility of the young lady being led to think that she was under no obligation to him, he evidently felt so sanguine and had so much delight, that Nicholas would not breathe a doubt upon the subject. All this time, however, there hovered upon the tip of his tongue a confession that the very same objections which Mr. Cheeryble had stated to the employment of his nephew in this commission applied with at least equal force and validity to himself, and 100 times had he been upon the point of avowing the real state of his feelings, and entreating to be released from it. But, as often, treading upon the heels of this impulse came another, which urged him to refrain, and to keep his secret to his own breast. Why should I, thought Nicholas, why should I throw difficulties in the way of this benevolent and high-minded design? What if I do love and reverence this good and lovely creature? Should I not appear a most arrogant and shallow coxcomb if I gravely represented that there was any danger of her falling in love with me? Besides, have I no confidence in myself? Am I not now bound in honour to repress these thoughts? Has not this excellent man a right to my best and heartiest services, and should any considerations of self deter me from rendering them? Asking himself such questions as these, Nicholas mentally answered with great emphasis, "No," and persuading himself that he was a most conscientious and glorious martyr, nobly resolved to do what, if he had examined his own heart a little more carefully, he would have found he could not resist. Such is the sleight of hand by which we juggle with ourselves, and change our very weaknesses into stanch and most magnanimous virtues. Mr. Cheeryble, being of course wholly unsuspicious that such reflections were presenting themselves to his young friend, proceeded to give him the needful credentials and directions for his first visit, which was to be made next morning, and all preliminaries being arranged, and the strictest